Back. So, we're going to be looking at, again, more of the first presidents. Here we're going to be talking about the second and third president, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. So, let's get started. John Adams becomes our second president. Now remember, he was the vice president under George Washington. But that's an act to follow, all right. Washington is so well respected. It's going to be hard for John Adams to go ahead and fill that role. Now, John Adams is the father of the Navy. Again, although the Navy is created under George Washington, which it technically was, again, Adams really did help organize it, a lot of the internals of it, and really is known as the father of the Navy here. He's from the great state of Massachusetts. That's right. And one of his biggest accomplishments is that he keeps the U.S. from going to war with France. Yes, we were going to go to war with France. We were this close. In fact, even President Washington, well, former President Washington, was going to come out of retirement and lead the army as a general once again. It's kind of a crazy idea, but this almost happened. And if it wasn't for John Adams, it might have actually happened. So one of the most controversial parts of John Adams' presidency is the XYZ affair. Now, there's a few controversies during his presidency, and we're going to be going over those. So, conflicts start to rise over shipping between France and the U.S. as France continues to go ahead and seize our ships. Again, they're going through the French Revolution. There's all different types of leadership going on over there and leadership change. Nevertheless, we can't have that. And so, the U.S. sends over 3 diplomats to France: John Marshall, Charles Pinckney, and Elbridge Gerry. And they're going to meet with the French Foreign Minister, Charles Maurice de Talleyrand-Peyragueau. And what happens is they get there, and the French foreign minister there does not go ahead and meet with them, with the diplomats, and instead sends 3 minor officials to go ahead and ask for a bribe, a loan, and an apology. They say no. They say no. And when John Adams goes ahead and refers to this incident to Congress, he refers to those 3 minor officials as X, Y, and Z, hence the XYZ affair. But they didn't do that. The U.S. was very, very mad about this because they showed that France wasn't taking us seriously. And so they're ready to go to war over this. Well, Adams allowed cooler heads to prevail. He goes ahead, he does meet with Charles Maurice de Talleyrand-Peyragueau, and all is well and settled. But the U.S. still doesn't want to be taken lightly, and France clearly was doing that. And so we see that because of the XYZ affair, Adams puts in probably his greatest mistake, the Alien Sedition Act. Now, to be clear, Adams even was hesitant in signing this bill over that Congress had made, but he did sign it, and that becomes his biggest downfall. Now, what did it say? Well, the Alien Acts, as there are a number of different acts and then one Sedition Act, the Alien Acts aimed at the French and the Irish who supported France. So what they do go ahead and say is the period for residency increased from 5 to 14 years, meaning if you came over, you could apply for citizenship after 5 years. Now it's 14. Foreigners had to register with the government, and the president could jail or expel any foreigner he thought was a danger to the country. Again, pretty intense things. Now, the Sedition Act arguably was a little bit more controversial here in the U.S. and with its citizens, and that's because it prohibited any criticism of public officials. And what does that go against? Exactly. The First Amendment, freedom of speech. In fact, 9 Democratic Republican newspaper editors are going to be imprisoned, one being Ben Franklin's grandson. Now, they are going to be pardoned eventually, but this shows that we have a serious conflict, because you can't go ahead and say, oh, federal government, you have freedom of speech, First Amendment, and then all of a sudden, you can't say anything bad about the government. It doesn't work that way. And so Thomas Jefferson and James Madison both draw up the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions. They said straight up that they were unconstitutional, these Alien Sedition Acts. And if a government goes ahead and makes an unconstitutional act, the state government should not follow it, meaning states could nullify federal laws they felt were illegal. Meaning, again, to even simplify that more, if the state doesn't agree with that federal law, they should go ahead and not be able to follow it because that law is illegal. Now, this almost goes over the supremacy clause we talked about, where the federal government had the most power over certain things, meaning if there was a conflict between state and federal law, you'd go with the federal law, supremacy clause. So this begins a huge mess, all because of the XYZ affair and how it was handled. In the end, this is going to be John Adams' downfall, and it follows him in that one term he serves as Thomas Jefferson is elected as our third president, and he's going to serve 2 terms. So Washington served 2, Adams served 1, Jefferson is going to serve 2. So the election of 1800 and how Jefferson gets that is insane. You have the Federalists have 2 candidates, John Adams and Charles Pinckney, again wanting a strong central government, all about manufacturing, again mainly in the North and such, supporting Great Britain as their ally, and very much loose construction when it comes to the actual Constitution. Versus the Democratic Republicans, you have Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr. They're going to want a limited federal government. They're going to want agricultural, more agricultural like in the South. They're going to want strict construction, and they support France. Now, these elections were not like they are today. All 4 of these men were running up against each other, and whoever got second place became VP. Well, that's where things start to go a little crazy. We have Thomas Jefferson versus Aaron Burr versus John Adams versus Charles Pinckney. Now, what the goal was that you'd go ahead and you'd have all the Democratic Republicans from the Electoral College vote for Jefferson and vote for Aaron Burr. They had 2 votes each. Perfect, right? One person would just throw their vote, making, Thomas Jefferson win, and Aaron Burr gets second place. But one person didn't throw their vote, and because of that, we have a tie. When there's a tie, it goes to the House of Representatives. They decide who becomes president. And one man, Alexander Hamilton, goes ahead and expresses that he is for Thomas Jefferson and is going to cast his vote for Thomas Jefferson, as he does not understand what Burr actually stands for. And it's very famous that on the 36th ballot, Jefferson wins. And as a result, we get the 12th Amendment. And the 12th Amendment means we have a system of president and vice president that run together on a ticket, meaning you have your president and vice president, one, and of course, for the other political party, the same. So it's pretty interesting to see that, that solves a lot of problems because you don't have the vice presidency going to whoever wins second place. So it solves a lot of issues, for sure. So one of the biggest things during Jefferson's presidency is Louisiana Purchase. He goes ahead and doubles the size of the U.S. with this. Now, Spain did own the Louisiana territory. France is going to grab it up, and Napoleon from France, who's now in charge, is going to sell it very cheap to Thomas Jefferson. But why? Why so cheap? Well, in the French colony Hispaniola, the slave colony, the slaves actually went ahead and they overthrew the French colonists and drove them out, making what is current day Haiti and Dominican Republic, independent. The reason why Napoleon went ahead and sold Louisiana was his goal was to feed supplies into Hispaniola, go through Louisiana, and attack the U.S. eventually. But without that little, stopping ground before he goes into Louisiana, that's going to make it a lot harder. So what he does is he sells it for $15 million. That is a bargain for all that land. And we double the size of the U.S. It's a big issue, though. France needed money, like I said, so they sold the Louisiana Purchase for us. $15 million. My goodness, so cheap. But does it say anywhere in the Constitution that the president has the authority to make a decision on to buy new territory? It doesn't. But Thomas Jefferson's a strict constructionist, so it should, right? Yes, if Thomas Jefferson followed what he believed as a strict constructionist, he wouldn't have bought it. Because the federal government doesn't say anything about them buying land in the Constitution. He does become a loose constructionist, and thank goodness, honestly, because of course, this allows us to double the size of the U.S. So, yes, it was a good thing that he went ahead and bought it as a loose constructionist for sure. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. So he sends out the Corps of Discovery. We've got Meriwether Lewis and William Clark leading an expedition to go ahead and explore this new purchase. Again, they couldn't have done it without Sacagawea, or as most people refer to as Sacagawea. However, in the Shoshone, it is Sacagawea. That's how it's pronounced. So the Shoshone woman here looks as a guide. She's incredible. Sacagawea is incredible in how she saves their so many times during this journey. It is insane, and she really does. There's so many different instances that we'll be talking about. So as we start to go from this really Federalist stronghold that was the Supreme Court under Adams into the Democratic Republicans that are Thomas Jefferson, we see the Marbury v. Madison court case spring up. Before leaving office, Adams went ahead and hurried to fill a bunch of federal judgeships with Federalists. Jefferson takes the office the next day. Now these judges are called the Midnight Judges because of that. Jefferson takes them and removes them the next day when he's in office. Marbury v. Madison allows the Supreme Court to go ahead and use something very important in deciding this case. To be honest, the Marbury v. Madison case as a whole, again, whether or not these judges were, appointed legally, is not that big in history. What is, though, is that the judicial review used during Marbury v. Madison is huge. Again, judicial review is the power of the Supreme Court to declare that a law is unconstitutional. This is the first time they use that, and of course, it's by no means the last time, which is pretty incredible. It's a very powerful power they have. All right, and we have right at the tail end of Thomas Jefferson's presidency, we see the rumblings of a war. The president during this war itself is going to be our next president, James Madison, and his lovely wife, Dolly, is going to be the first lady. So, what are the causes of the War of 1812? Well, first, the British were impressing our American sailors, meaning they were the British Navy was going onto our American ships, stealing our sailors, and going ahead and saying, hey, you're part of the British Navy now, against their will, and taking our cargo. They're going to have huge international conflicts over shipping and over trade and commerce. In 1807, Thomas Jefferson puts through the Embargo Act, basically saying, because everyone's taking our ships and taking everybody off our ships, we're no longer going to go ahead and export to foreign countries. And they say, fine. And as you can see, man, does exports and money go down. It was a very horrible, horrible decision that Thomas Jefferson made. But again, at the end of the day, he does go ahead and get rid of it. We also see that the British are aiding the Native Americans on the frontier, and they are attacking us. So because of that, we go ahead and have what some consider the Second War of Independence. Now, the War of 1812, we're not going to get into many of the specific battles here. There's quite a bit. It goes up into Canada. We're going to talk about some of the most important things. Probably the biggest is, of course, there at Washington, D.C. What happens is, we burned the capital of York up in Canada. Again, remember, Canada was British North America then. They come back and they burn our capital to the ground. Washington, D.C., including the Executive Mansion, which is, essentially the White House, the Executive Mansion gets burned to the ground. Yeah, pretty crazy, right? So, a couple other things. The naval battles we have are probably the most famous is with Old Ironsides, the USS Constitution, which didn't actually have iron on its sides. It actually had really strong wood that the cannonballs just bounced right off of, as if the sides were made of iron. Probably one of the more famous naval battles is with Oliver Hazard Perry on the Great Lakes. Again, probably his most famous is, "We have met the enemy, and they are ours." One of his most famous quotes there. So, the burning of D.C. is huge. I mean, it was a retaliation because we burnt York, and Dolly Madison very famously organized the evacuation of the Executive Mansion, and when she does, she saves the Gilbert Stuart portrait of George Washington. Very famously. We would not have that original if Dolly didn't go ahead and save it. And to this day, in the White House, when you see the Gilbert Stuart painting of George Washington, Dolly is still looking over it. So another big battle here, really because of what comes out of it, a certain poem, is Fort McHenry. Basically, Fort McHenry guards Baltimore Harbor. There was a battle that happened there during the war, and Francis Scott Key is actually captured and in the brig. He's in the prison of the ship, if you will. And there he writes the famous poem, The Star-Spangled Banner. Now, it was never meant to be a song. It was never meant to be a national anthem by any means. But there he writes those words, as among others. It's really just one verse that we sing. There's a bunch of verses in the poem. And ironically, it's also a tune from a British song. But nevertheless, our national anthem. But I digress. And what he's going to talk about is what he saw. The rocket's red glare, bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. The British had not taken that fort. And that was huge. That was huge. The rocket's red glare, bombs bursting in the air. The Battle of New Orleans. This battle is one of the weirdest battles, because it actually takes place after the peace treaty was signed. Andrew Jackson didn't check his phone, I guess. I don't know. Oh, in reality, it took a while to get word all the way from Ghent, Belgium, where the Treaty of Ghent is signed that ends the war, all the way down to Louisiana. And so Andrew Jackson fought this battle and won on tremendous odds, with, of course, so many British killed and wounded versus only, I believe, 90 casualties here on the side of the U.S.
Hi, this is future Mr. Lang, editing this virtual classroom. So I just want to go ahead and point out that don't listen to this guy. It was actually around 60 to 65 American casualties during the Battle of New Orleans. Okay, back to you.
And this makes Andrew Jackson a known hero, makes him a household name. And, well, it was already after the treaty was signed. The War of 1812 is a weird war. I mean, even now, we're in 1815. We're not in 1812 anymore. It's lasted quite a while. So, what are the effects of the War of 1812? Well, first, Britain and France gained respect for the U.S. That's huge. Again, they stopped impressing our ships, which technically some of them did before the war. They stopped impressing our ships, and we show Britain that we can be a formidable fighter for sure. What's interesting is, of course, Britain really does end this war kind of hastily because, of course, they're chasing Napoleon over in France at this point. And because of that, they're like, well, we can't, we don't want to split our troops up. Like, just sign a peace treaty with the Americans. We'll go ahead and we'll deal with them later. We got to go deal with Napoleon and Europe stomping all over the place. So it's pretty interesting to see that, of course, we come out pretty well in this war, considering we really didn't win this war, man. Our capital burned to the ground. We have a huge surge of national pride after this. In fact, they call it the era of good feelings. U.S. manufacturing increases. And of course, Native Americans' resistance declines, especially on that western frontier. So this, overall, the effects of the war is we won without winning. It's weird. In the end, the effects of the war really are that, we gained a lot out of this, but really, did we come out victorious? And so these right here are the effects of the war. Alrighty, thanks for joining me. Again, I'll see you back in the classroom.